Hi, everyone. This is Jacqui Cooper with Crypto Mom 2 Talk Show. And I want to thank everyone for hopping on this really special episode today and to welcome everyone to definitely like and subscribe so you can hear about future episodes and conversations about everything going on about the blockchain. So, for those that are new to Crypto Mom 2, I just want to share a little bit of background about myself before we hop over to our special guest. I am relatively new to this space in comparison to a lot of the other individuals that I've been interviewing over the past few years. I started my journey about 3-ish years ago. And as a new person exploring the blockchain and cryptocurrency, I knew that there was so much I didn't know. My background is law, and I'm also a special education teacher and also a single mom. So, with all of that, as I started to explore, I realized that there were many individuals that I was meeting and talking to that really needed to understand more the ins and outs, the ups and downs, and the creativity on this blockchain and that really means. So, I started the show so that way I could provide education and resources for those that are listening. And I've been interviewing people all around the world, and it's been an amazing journey. Today, I am so honored and excited to have my guest on. Sandra Ro is the CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited is that this year I actually have become an ambassador on the media side. And I think that it is so important for us to be able to share responsibly information about what's going on in our community because it is evolving and changing so fast. And it's really difficult to stay on top of everything. So, as I always tell everyone, these shows are not financial advice. You definitely have to do your own research and invest at your own risk. There's a lot of wonderful things going on. But again, you have to do your own research. So, with that, I want to welcome Sandra. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Very excited for what we're about to spend a few minutes on. Actually, hopefully next half hour.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm blown away to spend time with you because I follow you and what the Global Blockchain Business Council is doing. For those that don't know about GBBC, can you just share a little bit of background on why the organization was started, how you became involved? Because I do think that globally, everyone who's involved is making a huge difference.
Thank you so much for that. So let me give the short version of how GBBC got started. Just like any other uh, great group in crypto and blockchain these days, it was a group of entrepreneurs that came up with an idea. And at the time, we happened to be on Sir Richard Branson's Necker Island during Blockchain Summit 2016. It was still very early on and a lot of information coming in different directions. We realized it was very confusing. So nonprofit got formed out of Switzerland. We're a Geneva-based organization focused on three areas: education, advocacy, and partnership. We remain, after 5 years, focused on those three pillars. Now, today, obviously, there's a lot more information and there's a lot of great stuff going on. But when we started back in 2017, when we launched at Davos in January of 2017, it's a handful of people, a handful of experts, if you can even call them experts, really. I hate to use that word. But people who were genuinely building in the blockchain crypto space, people who were genuinely interested, spanning from technologists to humanitarians to very wealthy folks getting together and trying to figure out how could we possibly solve some of the world's biggest problems by inclusiveness, meaning educating world leaders, educating regulators, educating executives of the biggest companies in the world, and bringing them alongside with those who are doing really cutting edge blockchain building or crypto building. And that is actually still to our day the GBBC mantra. We bring lots of different people from all kinds of walks of life to come together, solve really big problems. And you already mentioned one: media, disinformation, and how we could actually use tech to help combat some of that. Now, I also understand that technology's created some of the problems that we have today, but there are tools that we could use to help, combat disinformation. And I think the more we all collectively work together to problem solve, we can solve these problems. It's just these are very, very, very large global issues.
I agree with you. They are large, and it does take a community, which is actually why the blockchain got started, because it was peer to peer. And for those that are listening, some of you might be familiar with terms, some of you might not be familiar with terms. We will try to define things as we go. However, if you have any questions, definitely reach out. That's why I'm here, is to help you understand the technology and the terminology. Because when I first started, I had no clue what an altcoin was. I didn't know what Bitcoin was. I didn't know anything. And, as a teacher, I think of, I'm in elementary school. So I remember what I teach a kindergartner versus a fifth grader. So, I view myself in right now, maybe in middle school, but I know that there are individuals, the coders that are in the blockchain, they're in graduate school. They're just, their knowledge base is just phenomenal. So what about you? How did you get started in this journey? I know you told us about the council, but how did you get started?
Sure. I feel like I've had 9 lives inside of crypto at this point. It's 10 years now. Makes me feel incredibly old. I think I might be a crypto boomer, but I'll take that. Definitely a fast-paced environment.
Yes.
So 10 years ago, I heard about the Bitcoin white paper, and I was sitting in London. I was a banker at the time, and those who were part of the financial services infrastructure back in 2008 or 9 would remember how scary a period of time that was.
I do remember that too. Yeah.
There are folks out there who will remember that we had a situation for a couple years where everyone thought that the global financial services or infrastructure, global capital markets, were actually going to collapse. And people use the word collapse. I've
Mhm.
actually never been so terrified of the word like collapse of an entire ecosystem. And that's what we were talking about. And I was in the middle of that. I was in the derivatives markets and foreign exchange. Always thought that our banks were sound, our big financial institutions were sound. But that was a wake up call to really the fragility of not only how wonderful, how interconnected we are, but also how scary that can be when things start falling apart very quickly. And around that time, and it was at that point, we'd gone through '08 and '09. I watched 5 rounds of layoffs at Morgan Stanley. And it was actually quite a terrible time to be a banker. I still plodded on and got to a place where in 2010, 11, it was really 11, someone mentioned to me Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And at that point, a number of the foreign exchange traders had already heard about it. A lot of this was word of mouth. And
Yep.
I would meet up with people in like really dodgy pubs in London, and we would try to figure out what this thing was. And I imagine people think it was very sophisticated, but in fact, I'll tell you right now, I remember very precisely, we had a laptop in a pub. We were trying to connect to some guy in Silicon Valley to understand Bitcoin better because we were trying to understand whether it worked or not. And it was just a disaster. We ended up drinking lots of beer. That was about it. But these were very manual processes. The wallets were terrible. Trying to get Bitcoin, it was really very challenging. It wasn't actually that easy. Long story short, fast forward a number of years, and now we have a proliferation of not only different types of crypto, but also the evolution of digital assets. How can we tokenize and digitize things, whether it's gold or real estate, or your pet, if you want to make that pet an NFT, today, which is a non-fungible token, it's a digital representation of that thing. We can do that. And all of that really came out of the Genesis crypto, which was the Bitcoin concept, which started off as a P2P electronic exchange of payment. And it's grown. The use cases that we can talk about, if we want to, today
Yeah.
are prolific, from digital identity to combating disinformation to protecting people's IP to many other applications.
Yes, you're right. And you touched on so many different things. Oh, I do remember when Bitcoin came out, and I didn't think it was going to last. And now 13 years down the road, here we are.
Yeah.
It's amazing in terms of how the idea came about and then how people ran with it. But I do want to go back to the foundation as to why it came about, because I want us to kind of hop over and talk about the executive order that just came out on March 9th, 2022 by the White House, which talks about, responsible development of digital assets. But, as I mentioned to you offline before we started recording, I did a fresh read of it, and there were so many things that popped out at me. One of the things that I do want to ask you to kind of explain is, why do you think the blockchain was created? What was the issue that people were trying to solve? Because that's going to, I think, bleed over to our conversation about this responsible development of digital assets and the government legislation of that area. So what do you think the purpose of the blockchain is, and the use of the digital assets as currency?
Yeah, I mean, look, if we take the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, which is the Bitcoin white paper, as the basis, what you see actually is a combination of a number of technologies that came together under the house of that white paper. It's cryptography, which means encrypted signatures and encrypted ways of verifying something. It was distributed technology, which has been around way before, Bitcoin white paper, and how to actually trade information around, or send information around, I should say, in a distributed fashion. Distributed systems are not new. How do you solve the double spend problem? That to me was the linchpin, which is, how do I not game the system? Or how does the system prevent me from gaming the system? Because you start with the premise that someone's going to try to cheat in a system that is P2P. And what that solved for, which is called the double spend problem, meaning I can't go spend that same 100 whatever in one place and then go spend it again somewhere else, even though I only have 100. And I think that is critically important to the whole ethos of trusting a network to be able to compute the transaction properly, then verify and record that, and that recording on a block and into a chain of records sounds like, to me, a real-time ledger system, which ultimately that's really all it is. And it doesn't sound revolutionary, but it is when you and I and anyone else in the world can hold a golden copy of something that updates in real time. It is very hard pressed to find that today in just a database system, because most of them are siloed. Most of them require lots of hurdles to have that same information. And even within the same firm, it's not always clear that you also get the same information exactly the way the person next door might be getting it. And I think these are the things that blockchain solves for, and are the benefits of blockchain. We can certainly talk about the risks, but that is what people really talk about, which is, wow, we can share information, we can share transactions directly in a more frictionless, transparent, and secure way.
I agree with you on that. And some of the words that you said are are points that I do want us to talk about. Transparent, but there's privacy. So let's go ahead and talk about the executive order, because there was a lot of things in here, and I have it actually right here. So I have a lot of questions, but I want to have you start off. What do you think are the highlights in this order that we might need to watch for? Because I know you've talked to so many important people about what this is and what we need to be looking out for.
Yeah, sure. If I may take one sidestep, just
yeah.
We know that there was a buildup to an executive order coming out from the White House, because you've seen, and many people have seen, the public hearings from the Banking Committee, and I just spoke at the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee related to whether CFTC should have a wider remit around crypto assets. These conversations were all very intentional leading up to, the executive order as another point in the larger US context of, this is important, we can't ignore it anymore, and therefore different agencies and different arms of the government will have to respond depending on the topics. Now, you asked me, what are the things that we should be looking for? Well, there's some obvious ones. I'm going to name those first. Consumer protection. Absolutely. Hands down, we need guardrails to help folks. And even though you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, please, do your own research. People are still getting scammed. People are still
Yeah.
getting duped. And we've got to get rid of these bad actors. And these bad actors need to face consequences, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's critically important. And I, along with many, many others in the industry, are all for that. Get the bad actors out and make sure there's accountability for behaving badly. So that's one, consumer protection. Number two, related to cybersecurity and national security, there's a lot of different subtopics within that. But absolutely, we have hacking's on the rise. Ransomware is an issue. Some of it's being used, crypto is being used for some of that. And we need to work with government and law enforcement. And that is already happening, by the way, and especially all the sanction stuff that's going on right now. That private public sector collaboration is happening. And so I think that's actually a very good sign. Without even an executive order, those things were being worked on. So I think those are very positive elements to what private sector could do to help government. A couple of the other areas that you can imagine will be like who has oversight over what. Different agencies will have different responsibilities. They've all been given assignments. It's almost like they've been given homework.
Yeah.
Somewhere between, I think, 90, some of them have 90 days, most of them have 180 days, but it is a short time frame if you think about it. So it's not so obvious things that I think people should look out for. Think about how important this is as a topic when the timelines are that tight. For 120 days in government is a very short period of time. And let's not forget, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We have a war going on around the other side of the world that is terrifying. And really, my heart goes out to the Ukraine people. And just hyperinflation. We've got a number of different massive issues going on, but yet it's been handed down. You must look at this subtopic, blockchain, digital assets, and come up with an analysis. And usually these reports are very meaty and very weighty. These are not short-term 5-page papers. These are going to be substantial, and pretty much every agency's been given a task.
Yes, it's like a laundry list of agencies. As I kept looking through, there was different discussions of who's partnering with who and different things like that. And in my younger life as a lawyer, I was at the Veterans Administration and also I interned on Congress. And I know communication is not always fast and speedy between organizations. So the turnaround time is very short. One of the things that stood out to me is the idea of having a digital coin. That governments are looking at digital coins. Now, I had seen that in many news things that I follow, many countries are looking at these digital assets. But also what stood out is it talked about the importance of the United States staying primary in the position in the financial market. And that seemed to me to drive this paper and executive order that they wanted to make sure that we always stayed positioned on top. I was looking at the philosophical side of why digital assets, why cryptocurrency, why altcoins, why NFT, all this, all these things. Why are people intrigued with it? And so on the one side, there's all this creativity and freedom. On the other side, now we're looking at control. And I agree with you, there has to be regulations and support so that we consumers are protected. But I'm concerned about the regulations that governments put on, the lack of freedom of speech and ideas. I'm not sure where all this is going to go. What are your thoughts about that?
I encourage, if there is one actionable that comes out of today, everyone needs to pay attention and actually voice, especially in the United States, if that's where you sit. You have the right to express your views on things. And that also means doing your homework and staying on top of things as laws are written. We are in a period of time where there will be legislation and regulatory frameworks put in place. If you care enough about data privacy or your own privacy, you care enough about these rules that are coming in, it really behooves all of us, not just you or I, but as a collective, to make sure that our voices are heard, because absent of that, very bad rules and laws will be written. And we have only ourselves to blame that we didn't step up. There are public consultations that are being asked all the time from the public. I don't think we utilize that as a tool often enough as general public domain. I know we're all very busy, but if we really care about the future of how we, in the United States at least, evolve, and we know that, obviously government would like US to remain the leader. I get that, but also, as you mentioned, balancing the right types of regulation and frameworks with allowing for the innovation and free speech and protection of privacy is incredibly important. And that will only happen if we're talking to our Congress people, if we are talking to and educating our local government and making sure they don't start going off piste because they only hear one side of the story. And I think it's really important that as a collective, there are many voices, and we hire, or sorry, I shouldn't say hire, we vote our congressional members in to write laws that are prudent, but often they need help. The staffers need help with that education piece. When we spend our time at GBBC providing as much balanced information, fact-based information, but we can't cover it all. We need everyone's help.
Yeah. Is there, do you think that there's something in the executive order that an individual needs to look at that will impact them if they decide that they want to buy some altcoins on a platform? What should they be thinking about that will kind of bring it down to their level? Because again, there's a lot of, right now it's the broad view, but until it actually reaches the streets, people don't see the impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a difficult question to ask in many ways because I feel like everyone's got different reasons for why they're interested in crypto. I think accessibility is still very important. You should be allowed to access crypto through many different avenues, and I think making sure that access is available is critically important. We need more access points, actually. I don't think we have enough. And also then from a protection standpoint, some level of KYC AML is going to be required. I just don't think we are going to exist in a world where we can get away with having just being able to buy it without any kind of identification of holdings. I just think that ship has sailed. And as this grows, we're at, I believe, close to 250 million crypto users around the world. That's pretty amazing. That number will probably grow to 1 billion over the next number of years. And as that grows, I think different people will have different reasons for accessing the whether it's store of value or whether it is used for payment rails. I think what individual people should be looking at right now is how is my data going to be protected in terms of my transactions? Is that going to be completely exposed so that the government can see that? That would be very bad. What compliance, requirements would I have? Is it similar to the way I have to be compliant with a bank account? Okay, that's really not too bad, right? We have to do it anyway for bank accounts. And I think making sure that there's not massive departure from what you're already doing is something that, you should speak up if there are laws being proposed that actually give government greater insight into things that they're not really should not be authorized to say.
You touched on a lot of things, and while you were chatting or explaining that, one area that popped into my mind was taxes. Again, I don't know how this is going to unfold, but again, my own personal opinion is that cryptocurrency, is similar in many ways. If I was to travel over to London and exchange my dollar for a euro, when I come back, I don't get taxed on when I exchange it back, whether I made a little profit on it. But with cryptocurrency, the idea is that it's a digital asset that has appreciated and you might want to be taxed on it. So for me, it's like a square and a circle. It just is not the same products. And I'm hoping, and they're researching digital assets and having this conversation, that they might be more open to what is taxable and what's not taxable, because that is also, something that if you're doing a central bank digital currency, well, how is that different than an altcoin? Again, these are broad conversations that I'm not sure when they're going to be had.
Yeah, Yes, and as much as it sounds like a broken record to say, but devil is always in the details. And so it's great that this executive order has come out effectively saying that the US believes it's an important area of innovation, and therefore there will be legislation coming down the pipe. The key question is, what is the legislation? What are the definitions that IRS and all the other departments are going to use to define things? And that is where we all need to get involved. And whether it's through an organization like ours or others, there's different ways to express it directly. Right now, the CFTC has a public consultation on a number of different topics. You can go to their website and see, and you can comment yourself if you really want to on the varying topics that they've asked for. There is that free access point to view to express your views. But I know for most people that's not practical. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you stay on top of where things seem to be going from a trajectory standpoint, meaning there are plenty of people who are going to be advocating for data privacy and protecting transactions. And I don't know which way the CBDCs will go. I'm hoping in the United States of America that there will be oversight on how much government has access to transactions if there is a CBDC. But it's probably a very different situation in places like China or other countries where surveillance is a prevailing, part of existing in that country.
So another thing that you talked about way at the beginning is education. And I know that for me, that's really critical as to why I'm doing this talk show. And I think for everyone who is listening, everyone is listening with a different knowledge set. But it is, just like you've mentioned, it's important to find your source of where you can get education. And when I say education, I mean information that is not dealing with sales. Because again, you can get information that is sales oriented that only shows half the information. So really find a source that whose purpose has no motive behind it except simply to educate you on what's going on, and or find multiple sources. But again, discern what is, and just double check your facts. And that's why this is so important, because things are changing so fast. And that will help you with your expression of your opinion, because then you'll have information behind you. I know as a lawyer, one of the things that has really bothered me, and when I do my consulting, is that some individuals don't have wills. They don't have an estate plan, and they're not letting their families know that they're diving into the cryptocurrency area. You need to let others know who can help you as well, because again, that's part of the education side. I know that I'm looking at our time. I know that we need to wrap up. Any last minute thoughts that you want to share with everyone who's listening? This is probably going to be, the first of many conversations, everyone who's listening. But what thoughts would you like to have them take away?
So just a couple of points I think I'll leave the audience with. I got started 10 years ago interested in the tech. It had nothing to do with the price. The price was literally, no one thought it'd be where it is today.
Yeah.
So none of us were brilliant in that way. We just happened to be lucky, I would say. The interesting thing about where we are today is that, number one, there's so many more people involved. And I think don't forget why it started to begin with, which is a grassroots movement of people who believed in reimagining the way we operate, where decentralized systems could help us build trust so that we don't rely just on a single entity or a single government or a single person to be our end all be all. And that idea, obviously in its purest form, probably doesn't work for everyone around the world. But what we're noticing is hybrid models of communities coming together where people have different responsibilities, but it's a much more egalitarian kind of setup, as opposed to here's the big boss and then everyone underneath. These models are actually really powerful. And whether I think at this point, blockchain is here to stay, crypto is here to stay. But even if we're not using that influence, that grassroots power to the people concept is what I think is one of blockchain and crypto's biggest selling points or biggest points, which is empowering people. And in a world where people feel less and less powerful, this is amazing. And I think that is the spirit of what's driving a lot of the growth and creativity that's going on right now. So yes, even though there may be some bad elements and we do have some downsides, there's also a great deal of just amazing community inclusiveness. Anyone can join. Obviously, you just have to be wary, making sure that person's not a scammer, but there is that inclusiveness. And I've never been in a technology or a space industry that is as global and open and inclusive as the blockchain community.
I echo that totally. I mean, everyone who I've reached out to when I've asked a question, they've been gracious and open to educating me and lifting me up in my knowledge, and I believe in passing that along and giving back, because as you were talking, it is about both those who don't have access to the economics, the bank accounts, as well as those that do, and creating that egalitarianism that everyone deserves access, and the freedom to make the choices as to what to do with their funds. And that's what intrigued me about the blockchain and the peer-to-peer, and the idea that you could have a wallet and to do something with it, and there's privacy, even on the blockchain. So again, so many conversations we can have. I want to thank you so much for being on. I am delighted to be able to be part of the Global Blockchain Business Council. Everyone, the links will be below so you can find resources to educate yourself, and whatever questions you have, reach out. We're here to support you. Again, my mantra is be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We're all interconnected. We're all on this planet together, and have a great day. Thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.